Jeffrey Slavin, the Mayor of Somerset. As a municipal entity, we take great pride in the stewardship of our town and are actively engaged in many aspects of its safety and aesthetics. We are concerned about the impact that ZTA 1811 would have on our community. First, the bill changes the zoning law so that cell tower antennas and panels can be put on the utility poles 30 feet from our homes, basically in our front yards. This is a reduction from the current 60-foot setback. Other communities have even greater setbacks than even our current 60-foot setback. We urge that the 60-foot setback be retained. Second, the bill changes the zoning law so that base equipment boxes as large as 20 cubic feet could be placed in the public right-of-way. This is an increase from the current allowable 12 cubic feet. This is a box so large that a small person could stand inside, and these would be on the ground near the utility poles in the public right-of-way. Additionally, the bill does not limit the number of equipment boxes that would be allowed. These towers and this equipment could be installed with no notice to the community and no prior hearing. In our town, we have above-the-ground utility poles. Antennas attached to utility poles occur as limited use, and therefore there is no hearing. While the installation of new towers would involve a hearing, we understand this bill even strips away a community's right to appeal a decision made by the Office of Zoning Administrative Hearings. The only recourse would be expensive litigation initiated by residents and paid for out of our own pockets. We are also concerned about the detrimental effect this would have on our home values. We refer you to the report, Impact of Communications Towers and Equipment on Nearby Property Values. The report concluded, as a general matter, visible utility structures do adversely affect property values. Finally, we note that currently the county has no provision for post-installation inspection. As a result, quite a number of poles in Montgomery County are not in the location cited on the application and are much closer to homes than are currently allowed by law. Certainly, a provision in this legislation should be instituted to mandate post-installation inspection and certification so that the poles are in the current place and operating safely. This reform should occur before any legislation is enacted. We understand the Council is concerned about the latest FCC rules which prohibit de facto and de jure moratoria on small cell deployment. However, other jurisdictions around the country that face the same regulatory challenges have successfully created zoning plans which do not take away the community's right to public notice. Neighboring Prince George's has a process which includes public notice, mapping, and hearing. Why are setbacks reduced to 30 feet in Montgomery County? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. And Molly Hauk. Molly Hauk.
My name is Molly Hauk.
Yep, and the Mayor, you'll turn your button off.
My name is Molly Hauk, and I am speaking to you on behalf of myself and my friend Sue Jacobson. She would be here today, but she's on her way back from Utah from a trip planned before the hearing was scheduled. In the footnotes, I have listed peer-reviewed studies establishing the connection between non-thermal radio frequency radiation from cell phones and brain cancer known as glioblastoma. As the rise of our use of wireless devices occurs, the occurrence of the cell phone brain cancer is also rising. It's the same cancer that killed Teddy Kennedy, Beau Biden, and John McCain. This is what Sue has asked me to say. My daughter Rebecca Pardo, was born and raised in Montgomery County. When she was a student at Wooten High School, she worked on the stage crew for every play the entire 4 years she was there. Since there was no way to know when she would need a ride home, we got her a cell phone so she could call home as needed. Like many kids with cell phones, she used it regularly and rarely used our landline, even when she was at home. Like many people, she kept her cell phone next to her bed and never turned it off, so her head was constantly bombarded with microwave radiation. She used it throughout college and then in California, where she worked and met a wonderful young man. She was engaged to be married and was happier than she had ever been. The summer of 2014, Becca was having bad headaches. The doctors kept diagnosing and treating her for sinus infections. Unfortunately, they were wrong. At 7 a.m. on Sunday, August 31st, Becca's wonderful fiancé, Scott, called. He was very concerned and wanted to know what to do. Becca had had another terrible headache and more nausea. I told him to take her to the ER. They put her on IVs for pain and nausea. When the pain meds did not help, they finally did a scan of her brain and told her she had a 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter cyst and they would do surgery in the morning. 2 hours later, she had a massive seizure and they had to put her on life support. They did immediate surgery and found a tumor, a large, malignant, and fast-growing glioma. It was glioblastoma type 4, which is always fatal. I was unable to go to California Sunday, but got there the next day. She was still on life support and in a deep coma. Nothing could be done. After much discussion with doctors and support staff, we agreed to discontinue life support as there was no possibility that she would ever regain consciousness. I lay beside her and held her. Her brother sat beside her and held her hand when they disconnected the machines that were breathing for her. She died at age 24 of glioblastoma. The most painful thing in the world is to watch your child die. Her father, fiancé, brother, and I will never be the same.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hauk. Appreciate your sharing that story. Mr. Duncan, Robert Duncan.
Good evening, council members. Some of you have already committed to protecting residents and neighborhoods concerning wireless telecommunications facilities, WTFs. Thank you. And I appreciate Mr. Leventhal's amendment to ZTA 1802, first passed by the Fed Committee. It shields residential neighborhood zones and stipulated that 1802's results be evaluated before subsequent ZTA's consideration. I also appreciate Mr. Elrich having pressed the county executive staff to fix administrative and regulatory problems that have festered for years. The executive staff failed to provide proposed regulations by June as promised. The only proposal you have is this premature, defective ZTA, which eliminates residential protections and imposes deceptive, dangerous, and inappropriate standards. Take utility poles. For replacement poles, the ZTA requires the prior utility pole to be removed within 180 days. That deadline is aspirational. Apparently, DPS cannot meaningfully enforce any removal deadline. And according to staff, nearby utility poles get replaced too. So for each antenna's replacement pole, we could see 3 to 5 sets of double poles. But the only set with the antenna is the one that the ZTA has a deadline for, albeit unenforceable. Safety studies show that additional and thicker poles contribute to traffic injuries and fatalities. So there are legitimate safety reasons to protect our neighborhood roads from unnecessary increases in double poles, new poles, and thicker poles. Eliminating our protective 60-foot dwelling setbacks would usher in more road hazards by giving antennas virtually unfettered access to neighborhood utility poles. The FAQs assure us that all new non-replacement poles get conditional use hearings and require a 300-foot dwelling setback. But for new utility poles, that's not so. Ignoring Assistant County Attorney Royalty's advice, DPS authorizes new utility poles for antennas as permitted and limited uses. DPS helps industry applicants dodge zoning regulations. This ZTA does not protect or respect residents. Tonight, I ask you to keep us safe, preserve our communities, and to first fix the dysfunction. Ensure our fair inclusion and representation and meaningful enforcement of regulatory protections. Consider our comprehensive antennas proposal, CAP, as the foundation for a collaborative solution between residents and county leaders. Please reject this ZTA. Work with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. President. All right. I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Stoddard. Thank you very much for your testimony. If I understood you right, you're saying that the future of 911 is in video, sort of like Skype, where it's live video, and you have your phone, and you show either yourself or the the setting that you're in.
Of the Montgomery County Civic Federation as chair of the Planning and Land Use Committee. Our association members of the MCCF represent over 100,000 households from civic and homeowners associations across the county. The term small cell to describe this is misleading, as 5G cells are not small in size. Small refers to the short broadcasting range of these cells due to the weakness of the signal. Implementation of 5G will require that these cell facilities be only a couple of hundred feet apart in some places due to the weak signals. They would also require large, noisy, refrigerator-sized equipment boxes up to 20 cubic feet large enough for a person to stand in. The ZTA proposes locating these a maximum of 30 feet from residences in all detached zones. Some of our member organizations are located in neighborhoods with underground utilities, while others have above-ground utilities, each presenting their own set of issues with regard to installation. During our September 17th general meeting, we reconfirmed our positions from our March 12th, 2018 meeting regarding ZTA 1802 from April, and our September 12th, 2016 meeting regarding ZTA 1605 from 2016. We oppose the elimination of public notice, the elimination of public hearings for these facilities, and we oppose the reduction of setbacks from 60 feet to 30 feet. Other local governments have designed their ordinances with community input and the surrounding environment in mind, including California, New York, Washington, and Illinois. Other local governments treat residential dwellings, schools, and hospitals as sensitive uses, and Montgomery County should as well. During the April 3rd public hearing, we requested that you work with us to craft a better ZTA and that you audit and address the problems with the current approval process. I'll allow you to read the rest of my testimony, but in summary, we respectfully request adding a provision that requires post-installation inspection and certification so that the poles are in the correct place and operating safely. This reform should occur before any additional legislation is adopted. Maintain public notice and public hearings for siting of all wireless transmission facilities. Maintain the setback from residences at 60 feet, and adopt the comprehensive antenna proposal as outlined by Sue President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harriet.
Okay, this summer I met with Joy Nurmi, Executive Assistant to Ike Leggett, and Mitzi Herrera, Cable and Broadband Administrator for the county. During that meeting, Joy repeatedly expressed that Mr. Leggett wants ZTA 1811 approved while he is in office in order to pave the way for 5G cell towers in residential areas. We have lived in our house for 37 years. We considered moving, but our grown children live in the area, so we decided to stay and remodel. We put more money into our house than we originally paid for it because we want to stay there as long as possible. But now our neighborhood is faced with the possibility of 16 cell towers in our front yards as tall as 24 feet with large antennas and large buzzing boxes next to each of them, spewing millimeter wave radiation throughout the neighborhood, our homes, and our bodies. They are dangerous for many reasons, and they could decrease our property values by up to 20%. Mitzi Herrera said that as many as 5,000 5G cell towers could be installed in Montgomery County. That's enough to wreck every neighborhood in the county. However, the need for these cell towers, every 5 to 11 homes or every 500 feet, has been debunked by the former CEO of Verizon, Lowell McAdam, as well as John Godfrey from Samsung. The county's plan, according to them, is based on an outdated myth. They insist that the signal can travel up to 2,000 feet directly to a receiver on the front of a specific house. The technology is changing very rapidly. More importantly, many analysts believe that for those of us who have fiber optic cable, 5G will be nothing more than an improvement in the speed at which we download movies. The analysts have also said that fiber optic cable is a perfectly acceptable solution for residential areas particularly when there are so many very serious questions being asked about the safety of 5G by the scientific and medical communities. Fortunately, Councilmember Craig Rice told me recently that the County Council fully expects to work with the residents as they did with the commercial areas so we can come up with something that we can all live with. That is good news because rushing forward with residential 5G for any reason is irresponsible, dangerous, and in direct opposition to the Council's job description, which is to protect the health and welfare of the residents. Defeat or defer ZTA 1811, and let's get it right. Work with us.
Thank you, Donna. And now we will have, there you go.
So, hi everyone, I'm Laura Simon. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not very good with all the nuts and bolts, but I'm here tonight to talk as a mother, a sister, a friend, a neighbor, and someone who cares very deeply about the health of our community. I'm here tonight speaking not for 5Gs. I feel like we have enough in the neighborhood already. I mean, not that we have enough, but we have enough of other types of microwave radiation in the neighborhood already. I feel like we are saturated. I understand that there are hot spots, but as someone spoke about, 5G is not that 5G is not the method to solve that. It's the 4G and 4G. Anyway, so sorry, I'm getting a little lost, a little frazzled. So the FCC has acknowledged that it's time to update the guidelines, and that were set over 2 decades ago. But this has not happened yet. And I feel that there should be a prerequisite before installing small cells. If the FCC has not updated the guidelines, then how can we ensure that human health is protected, and how can we know what is in compliance? I looked up lead on the American Cancer Society website. Since, like microwave radiation, it is a known neurotoxin and possibly carcinogenic. Although the mounting science for microwave radiation is actually that it should be reclassified as carcinogenic, is what the scientists are saying. The advice was that because lead can cause health problems, even aside from its possible link to cancer, it is important to limit your exposure whenever possible. You can't control everything in life, but that doesn't mean you should throw all caution to the wind. Is anyone here going to go out and buy gallons of lead paint because it is cheap and easy to paint your house and splash it all over the place? Of course not. Why would you take away our right to protect our health with regard to wireless radiation? This is why we live in America, and this is for sure why we live in Montgomery County. Please don't take away our right to act proactively and take care of our families. Let's be sure about what the health implications are before we roll this out and not be bullied by a law that gives someone else the right to endanger our health. Look at the firefighters in California. The firefighters in California received an exemption. You could see how real this issue is. An exemption because of health concerns. Abnormal brain function was found in every firefighter examined. And I'm sure you've heard of the City Council of Mill Valley, a town located just a few miles north of San Francisco, that voted to unanimously block down deployments of small cells to protect the health and safety of the community. Yes, you heard it right. California tech executives do not want this in their backyards,
right.
And neither do we. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simon. And that, all right, Mr. Eldridge has a question.
So I wanted to ask Mr. Donahue a question. It's been asserted that Montgomery County has to do this, otherwise we'll be preempted federally. You guys are active nationwide and you have resistance nationwide. So if Montgomery County were to do this, are you going to drop any effort to preempt local governments at the federal level that you're already engaged in, or at the state level?
I'm not
Do we
involved.
matter that much?
I'm not involved in lobbying with the FCC. I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Council President mentioned a vote pending for tomorrow. I'm not involved in those proceedings.
So you can't opine as whether or not Montgomery County is the crux, or whether or not you decide nationally to go forward with preemption legislation. You're waiting on us?
Because I pay attention to what's going on in Annapolis and Richmond and at the FCC, it's a very real possibility that the state or the Fed is going to continue to constrain local authority.
Regardless of what we do? Yeah. Just say that. Yes? Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. So regardless of what we do, whether we say we don't want to do it or we...
We believe that the text amendment that you have before you strikes a very excellent balance. We think it really does the job of protecting where needed and allowing for us to file, go through Tower Committee, go through hearing as necessary. We think the text amendment really does an excellent job of striking that balance.
I understand you feel. I'm just trying to get to the point, which I think is important, which is it's really not going to stop the efforts to preempt local governments because there are too many local governments that are already doing this. Right. Okay. So and my other question is, how many are you going to deploy? Because if the issue really is signal density and the inability to communicate, I know Donna's neighborhood, it's not particularly dense. It doesn't strike me as, doesn't have tons of tall apartments and many, many cell phone users. Right. So I guess my question is, if this is the kind of neighborhood that's going to get the towers, isn't this just going to be ubiquitous in the county?
So the towers that are poles that are less than 22 feet will be going through a hearing examiner and hearings. There's been some conversation about batching, but in any event, there'll be a public hearing. There's an opportunity to testify and oppose or support. So for those towers and those poles that are in the 22 and less height, they go through the process essentially as it is today.
And if they don't get built, then these neighborhoods will not have adequate cell service.
Well, it's going to be a real challenge. When we looked at the maps early on, we got the question about, why all the small cells in this particular area? Well, when you looked at, I've forgotten, Seneca, I guess it was, there was a large self-support tower in the other portion of the area where providing pretty good coverage. The gentleman mentioned 197-foot, that provides a large footprint. Where those towers don't exist, and where there's no water tank, where there's no BGE or PEPCO transmission towers, the small cells are the solution.
But if you had a 190-foot tower, could you do your 5G service off a 190-foot tower?
So we're really doing both. What we're really trying to do is use the macro sites, but use the small cells to help offload the capacity constraints on the network.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, it wasn't a direct response to me, but I want to just state my view, which is sort of parallel thought here, but different, which is that I think trying to resist doing anything is effectively capitulating to the industry. That's how I see it. And pretending that we can hold this off forever, which, by the way, we wouldn't want to do because we actually want to continue to use our phones the way that we want to use them. Rick Meyer.
I am Rick Meyer with the Montgomery County Coalition for the Control of Cell Towers, mc4t.org. Many communities require notice provisions, particularly for cell poles constructed in residential zones. These rules are intended to engage the community to help local governments prevent mistakes and keep applicants within the scope and the scale of their permits. Not so in Montgomery County, where for 7 years since small cells were first introduced, residents have been totally locked out of review and permitting processes, no notice, no input. And because we're purposely kept in the dark by the Tower Committee, the public must rely exclusively on an overworked and understaffed Department of Permitting Services to prevent construction mistakes on wireless attachments to utility poles in the rights of way. In my testimony in April, I summarized MC4T's physical inventory of more than 50 cell poles around the county. We found that more than half of these small cell facilities were non-conforming to the Tower Committee recommendations: too tall, inside minimum setbacks, oversized with too many antennas, installed without conditional use hearings, and even installed in the wrong poles at the wrong addresses. You'll hear more from that tonight from Vicki Ho. Many of these cell poles have multiple non-conformance issues. How is that possible? Well, to the specific questions by Mr. Lementhal and Mr. Ehrlich a few minutes ago, this summer we finally got our answer. County staff prepared an unsigned ZTA 1811 frequently asked questions document, and it includes an extraordinary paragraph about DPS. That document states very clearly that previously DPS performed no, and I repeat the word no, zoning reviews on cell poles and public rights of way. And further, the FAQ explained that there has been absolutely zero interdepartmental coordination to match up Tower Committee recommendations with the scope and scale of permits issued by DPS. So for the last 7 years, the actions of the Tower Committee have been irrelevant to the actions of DPS. This is an unbelievable Rip Van Winkle moment. DPS has suddenly awoken and is reportedly changing their procedures to perform inspections going forward. And what about those dozens of poles identified in our inventory? Well, they're still there, and we don't have a single instance to report to you of any enforcement action or any planned enforcement action. This must stop. Please work with us, engage with us. We have so much information to share. We have so much to learn from other communities. Appoint a citizens task force and adopt a fully comprehensive zoning proposal, not duct tape and chewing gum ZTAs that pop up every 6 months. Vote no. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
My name is Cindy Bachman. I am a resident of Potomac, Maryland. Please vote no on this amendment because it fails to hold the wireless industry accountable for the risks posed by their actions. Facts do matter. Please consider these. Number one, no need for cell towers near homes. Verizon's CEO said as recently as this June that millimeter waves from small cells travel further than originally expected, and towers, rather than being 200 feet apart, could be more like 3,000 feet apart. Number two, the industry and their lawyers consider adverse health effects of their technology on their bottom line. While you say you may not consider this for zoning purposes, please understand that the wireless companies absolutely do consider and document the potential health risks relating to radio frequency radiation, including certain cancers, in their publicly filed documents. Number three, and T-Mobile made this point in their presentation, since 1997, the Tower Committee has approved 99.4% of the 3,451 applications it has received. So either this is the most efficient committee, the applications were perfect when they were received, or perhaps there are insufficient resources, capacity, or knowledge to complete a thoughtful review of the applications, and that is why they go through. Number four, the Tower Committee approved 3 years ago a cell tower 15 to 20 feet from a school's outdoor play area where children as young as 2 play, and incidentally, this school has a no cell phone zone policy. The school, like others in the community, had no notice of the cell tower. They didn't recognize this new type of structure as being a cell tower. This application was part of a batch of 15 submitted by Crown Castle and Verizon. In 2015, it was approved in 45 days, and it operated to place 7 cell towers in a 1.5-mile stretch of Travilla Road. In this application, which was over 150 pages, there was no mention of a school or proximity to homes. The property also was described in the application simply as small cell on existing wood pole. The minutes did not mention schools, children, homes, nor reflect any community participation. Number 5, the Maryland Constitution says that persons should have remedies for injuries to themselves or property without denial or delay. There is no remedy I am aware of for a mistakenly placed cell tower, nor is there a record I am aware of where they have been corrected. This means there is no remedy for property value loss. Is the council okay with the Tower Committee being unaccountable and providing residents with no solutions?
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Bachman.
you.
Thank you. All right.
Cell tower antennas on the utility poles, no notice to our community, no hearing, just come home from work, and there it is, 30 feet from our houses. Since ZTA 1802 was introduced last winter, I and others have been researching on how other jurisdictions are handling the deployment of small cell infrastructure. Communities across the country are facing all the same threats as Montgomery County. We face this threat of state preemption, and we face looming, ever-encroaching FCC attempts to restrict local wireless siting authority. And yet, communities are responding differently. In Doylestown, Pennsylvania, the community was able to deploy small cell poles in a manner that satisfied both the community and the law. They faced litigation by Crown Castle, but they won. In Petaluma, California, 200-foot setbacks were instituted to protect residential areas. In Gaithersburg, a collaborative solution was created which protects residential areas. In Prince George's County, there is always community notice and a hearing for every proposed cell tower site. So I believe that here in Montgomery County, we can comply with existing law, but allow deployment in a manner that makes sense. Simply allowing small cell deployment will not bridge the digital divide either. It may make it worse. Carriers will only roll out new 5G wireless in those parts of the county where it makes economic sense for them to do so. 5G requires fiber optic cable underground and heavy infrastructure deployment. These will be the same areas that already have good wireless service and also wired fast broadband like services like Verizon Fios and upgraded Comcast internet access. So we should be asking questions like, where are the areas that are underserved? How do we induce or compel carriers to deliver wired and wireless services if they don't want to? How do we bring fiber to the door in every household so that all residents have access to secure, high-speed internet? Wired internet is the most secure and the fastest, and it enables both wired and wireless devices. In New York City, in a real effort to conquer the digital divide, the city took Verizon to court for failing to deliver on its 2008 franchise agreement to bring fiber to all residents to the door. Verizon had been allowed to charge fees for this massive fiber build-out, but it did not deliver to all residents who needed it and to whom it was promised. Hopefully with this lawsuit, all residents, including underserved residents, will have access to fast, secure broadband. Montgomery County should develop a comprehensive solution, and this is only a partial solution, which I oppose.
All right.
My name is Marion Eady. I'm the founder of the League of Conservation Voters. Not long ago, you passed a resolution declaring we face a climate emergency. If you really mean that, you should not pass this zoning text amendment in the form that it has today. We can build plenty more cell towers in Montgomery County. The industry wants this, to rush this through, to blanket our neighborhoods with cell phone towers so they can abandon their wired and fiber optic networks. They would rather lay off those maintenance workers and let our energy consumption skyrocket. A study reported in the Institute of Electronic and Electronics Engineers said, quote, wireless technologies will continue to consume at least 10 times more power than wired technologies when providing comparable access rates and traffic volumes. That's a bigger deal than it seems, because a snapshot of today is not a good guide to tomorrow on energy consumption. Demand from all internet devices is increasing by 20% every year. We face a tsunami of data. Internet of Things, robots, surveillance, driving cars, live streaming videos, and ever more trivial applications offered by an industry eager to create new products and market. A study by Swedish energy expert Anders André concluded the communications technology could consume about 20% of all electricity by 2025 and be responsible for 14% of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. We owe it to the climate to make data transmission as efficient as we possibly can. This zoning text amendment takes us in the opposite direction if it enables the abandonment of much more efficient wired connections, which is why the Sierra Club has urged you to hold off on passing any ordinance like this until you have thoroughly assessed its energy implications. These cell phone towers will threaten pollinators and migratory birds which use the Earth's electromagnetic fields for orientation and navigation. We all know bees are in dire trouble. Many studies suggest that EMFs are part of that problem. If you put a cell phone near a hive, the bees abandon it. I now have a yard humming with life from a hive and many native plants. If you put a cell phone next to my house, my yard will become a dead place. I know you're afraid of federal preemption, but that is not an excuse to roll over and play dead. The feds can preempt a moratorium, but we are only asking for reasonable zoning requirements and for you to work with us to reduce our risk. If you get sued, at least we will know you tried, and you can buy us valuable time. If you roll over and play dead, that tells us you are not really working for us, the citizens. You're working for the telecom industry.
Montgomery County. I'm against the ZTA amendment as it is. You probably heard a lot of stories from the industry, from people that live in Montgomery County, how they have no reception at home, or there's a necessity for 5G for 911 enhancements. I think the industry needs to fix the dead spots that are already existing in the neighborhoods. We have Verizon Fios deployment in Montgomery County, I believe, is over 92%. And I'm pretty sure probably 95% of the people in here are using wireless from home. I mean, they're not on the road trying to, look at stuff or do things. A little nervous there, sorry. I mean, I'm for 5G deployment in commercial settings. I don't think a lot of people have any issues with that, the residential. I think the main thing is just having it in the residential neighborhoods. Guess you're exposed to the radio frequencies 24/7. We have kids at home. We have people that stay home and work. I think majority of the people have Fios, Comcast already deployed in their environment, and I'm pretty sure in-home wireless from their Wi-Fi connected to fiber or connected to Comcast is going to be a lot more reliable than 5G located in front of someone else's house or in front of their house. As Donna mentioned, there's a possibility of 5,000 plus small cell towers deployments in Montgomery County. That's just maybe saying from Crown Castle or local carriers. But what happens if Amazon wants to get in the wireless industry, or Google? And what happens if they want to put up their towers? They're going to go through a basic hearing. I mean, how is it going to be vetted? I guess, what's the limit on density of these cell towers from multiple different companies, new startup companies? I know the distance is I think the distance for 5G is 200 to 500 feet. Someone said possibly 3,000 feet. But as for the density besides co-location, I mean, I think that could be an issue. If you open up this box, I mean, everybody's going to try to get a piece of the pie, I would say. And that's pretty much it. My concern is just really just the proliferation of these small cell towers in the environment, in our neighborhoods. I mean, commercial, I think everybody's fine for commercial. You want to put it down Great Seneca Highway, I think that's fair, but in residentials, at that density, I think it's a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Lauren Malone. Ed Myers.
Thank you. My name is Ed Myers. I'm a resident of North Potomac. Assuming the FCC votes out its proposed order tomorrow, it behooves the Council to revisit the ZTA to ensure to the best of its ability that the ZTA is revised as necessary to maximize the authority left to it and is consistent with the FCC's order. I hesitate to recommend this because, as an attorney presently challenging the FCC in the D.C. Circuit, I believe that this new FCC order also should be reversed or remanded on appeal. But putting that aside, we have to live with it. It's the current world we live in. I want to point out one important new development in the FCC's new order. That is the requirement that local agencies set out an express written policy on how aesthetic considerations, quality of life considerations, that is, will be addressed. Under the FCC's new order, any action by the local government that takes into account aesthetic factors without basing it on a pre-existing written agency policy will be deemed unlawful. I don't know that the ZTA contains such a policy, but it should. I also want to echo the need for post-installation inspections of the health effects and the radiation emitted by the so-called small cell facilities. While the 96 Telecom Act preempted the authority of the Council to consider safety and health prior to acting on applications, preemption only applies to the extent safety regulations are not being violated. Accordingly, the Council has the authority to require post-installation safety reviews conducted on a regular basis, say annually, after deployment. That should be in the ZTA if it isn't already. I also recommend to your attention the changes described in Sue President's testimony. She has more specific recommendations that I think are worth your attention. Finally, I sit here and listen to a lot of the hype about the transformative impacts that this new technology will provide. But the real problem is that it is reasonable to worry about the high-frequency radiation from this new technology. The standards that the FCC currently has in effect were imposed in 1996 based on 1992 science, far before anybody was thinking about a 5G high-frequency technology. In 2012, the Government Accountability Office said the FCC standards are out of date and may be inadequate. The FCC still hasn't acted on its 2013 proceeding and should be recommended that it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Myers. Good points. The county has definitely urged the FCC to update those RF emissions in that study. Theodora Scarato.
Hi. Theodora Scarato. I'm Executive Director with Environmental Health Trust, and we're working on this issue nationally and internationally. I think, speaking of millennials that were discussed, millennials are entirely unaware that the technology they love could harm their future ability to have children, could damage their memory, and could cause brain cancer. Contrary to assumptions that the radiation is low, be aware that industry has stated publicly in presentations that the radiation increases into communities from a fully deployed 5G network would exceed several countries' current radiation limits. The U.S. has among the highest allowable radiation limits, in the world. Why? Because, as was stated 22 years ago, the EPA was actually defunded from researching and setting proper safety standards that protect us from biological effects and instead adopted radiation limits by industry-filled groups based on outdated science. And as a recent Harvard investigation documents, our agencies are captured at the highest levels, with a revolving door between FCC leadership and wireless executives. Our regulatory system is broken, and that is why governments need to act at every level of government, not just with addressing the FCC. Cellular radiation is a new, rapidly increasing form of environmental pollution, and numerous peer-reviewed studies have shown effects from low levels, quote unquote, of this radiation, which are below FCC limits. The CDC just released findings of increased rates of brain, liver, and thyroid cancer among those under 20 in the United States. And replicated research has shown that this radiation can promote cancer growth when in combination with other toxic exposures. Hundreds of scientists have issued an appeal for urgent action to halt 5G because of this science showing effects below government limits. I just want to point out, as was stated earlier about the firefighters, there was neurological damage shown in the firefighters, which is how they got the exemption from the California streamlining bill. This issue cannot be put aside as go to the FCC. We need to take action now to protect communities. Yes. I also want to add that the public needs to be informed, because when they know, they will demand safe technology. And I would ask the council to develop new protective zoning and to a campaign to increase awareness among the public. You can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Falk.
Good evening. My name is Carol Falk, a 30-plus year resident of Montgomery County, and I'm here on behalf of the West Montgomery County Citizens Association. We are thousands strong, and we are fighting ZTA 1811 that would change zoning laws to allow private companies to stack 5G wireless system antennas on utility poles and buildings near our houses and schools without our agreement or consent. Additionally, these 5G wireless systems are unsightly and are proven to negatively impact property values because most people do not wish to live in close proximity to them, not only because they are unsightly, but because the radiation emanating from these towers can pose a serious health risk to residents, especially to children, which you should be concerned about, according to many experts in the scientific community. Over 240 scientists and doctors from 41 nations have appealed to the United Nations to reduce wireless exposure to people. On September 13, 2017, 180 scientists submitted a declaration to the European Commission calling for a moratorium on 5G cell antennas due to health risks. On September 19, 2017, Dr. Leonard Hardel, a senior consultant to the Department of Oncology at University Hospital in Örebro, Sweden, Martin Blank, a retired doctor with the Department of Physiology at Columbia University, and more than a dozen other American scientists, doctors, and professors wrote a letter to California Governor Jerry Brown pleading with him to veto legislation allowing more new cell towers, arguing there is a substantial body of evidence that this technology is harmful to humans and the environment. They said the 5G millimeter wave is known to heat the eyes, skin, and testes, and the ubiquitous placement of these towers will expose California's population 24/7. Many towers have already been installed without the consent or knowledge of Montgomery County residents. In some cases, they're as close as 20 feet to a homeowner's front door. I realize that some people want the latest and greatest 5G wireless phones that are coming. They want to view movies and videos on demand via their cell phones with a few seconds of clicking on a link or a website. But you should also realize that there are many, many of us in this community who do not want or need to view the latest video game gone viral on social media or blockbuster Hollywood drama on our phones. For normal work capacity needs, today's phones can transmit nearly unlimited data. I personally know at least 20 or at least a dozen people who work in the technology sector and who do not feel they need to own the latest iPhones. They don't want to pay $1,000 to have the A12 Bionic chip for better picture taking in dark bars, the quad LED True Tone flash, or the next generation neural engine, or the 6.5-inch screen. So just to sum it up, I strongly advise you to oppose ZTA 1811, allow Montgomery citizens the right to say no to these towers. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. You jarred me out of checking my phone. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your participation. Appreciate your comments. And council members tend to want to hear from the community at these hearings. So that may be why you don't hear questions typically asked. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Karen DeHaven. Our next panel, I should say. Karen DeHaven, Anna Pritchard, Lisa Klein, Stefan Rossetti, Vivek Kulkarni, Sarah Lizzie Timlin, Victoria Georgi. Okay, Karen DeHaven. Press the button and proceed.
Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak on ZTA 1811. I understand the amendment addresses approval standards for telecommunication towers, not 5G health issues per se. However, health concerns are an integral part of any wireless communication, despite claims to the contrary and cannot be separated from this amendment. While it's not the Council's role per the amendment to offer an official voice on 5G safety, it's incumbent upon you to take health concerns into consideration in addressing zoning issues. My main reason in testifying is to advocate for a dear friend unable to attend herself precisely due to ill health caused by EMF emission from cell phone towers. There is a cell tower at the end of her street, 0.4 miles from her home, 2,112 feet, 70 times the 30-foot setback proposal. At said distance, the radiation from this tower precludes her from taking walks. Among many effects, radiation exacerbates Lyme symptoms. It's extremely distressing to watch her health deteriorate, equally frustrating to see the difficulty in finding areas with limited EMF exposure as a safe place to live. With the advent of 5G, the ubiquitous presence of cell towers, and the exponential increase in non-ionizing radiation emitted, how will she, and the growing number like her, find safe places to live? The wireless industry should not be allowed to push its product on the public without consent. Wireless technology is not just a product, it's a product whose safety is in question. I quote an investigative article on the wireless industry published in The Nation. The scientific evidence that cell phones and wireless technologies in general can cause cancer and genetic damage is not definitive, but it is abundant and has been increasing over time. Contrary to the impression that most news coverage has given the public, 90% of the 200 existing studies included in NIH's PubMed database on the oxidative effects of wireless radiation have found a significant impact. 72% of neurological studies, 64% of DNA studies have also found effects. We cannot push aside these studies. We cannot disregard the signed petition of over 200 scientists and doctors from 35 countries calling for a moratorium on the rollout of 5G. I implore the Council to not jump to the conclusion that it's okay to roll out 5G. Do not take the industry's perspective, hook, line, and sinker. You cannot say it's okay because, in fact, it's not been proven safely. The overriding question is not on zoning. Rather, why are we even considering placement of towers when the safety of these towers and the radiation they emit is still in question? Why are you putting the cart before the horse? By continuing down this path, you're rolling the dice on the public's health. You're forcing county residents, like my friend, to move from their homes, EMF refugees with no place to live or means to support themselves. This is unacceptable.
Thank you, Karen. Anna Pritchard. No. Anna Pritchard? All right. Lisa Klein? No? Oh, okay. Anna.
Hello, council members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I am a retired registered nurse. I was a registered nurse for 35 years. I'm currently a certified nutritional consultant, and I'm very concerned about the health of everyone involved. I've seen a lot of suffering in my career, and I don't like to see suffering. I'm hoping to help relieve suffering in my community. I'm reading this article for Mr. Ankar Jain, who couldn't be here tonight. He holds a degree in electrical engineering, and for the last 12 years he has worked in the field of telecommunications, including wireless and 5G technology. For each of these statements that I will make, have a credible case studies that is done at a respectable university. 5G millimeter waves affect humans, animals, and plants due to their very high frequency. Human skin absorbs these very short 5 millimeter waves, which penetrate the skin and break up the DNA helix in bodies of living organisms, disrupt cellular metabolism, and generate stress proteins, which cause many diseases, including cancer. Thousands of studies have shown this. The World Health Organization and the National Toxicology Program concluded that the radiofrequency radiation of the type we currently use with our cell phones can cause cancer. With 5G technology, we are going to be bombarded by much higher frequencies at low short-range intensities, creating a yet more complicated, denser soup of electrosmog that exists now. Effects of microwave millimeter waves. 1. Effects on our skin. 2 studies show that microwave millimeter waves penetrate the skin, causing the possibility of more skin diseases and skin cancer and physical pain to our skin. 2, effects on our eyes. 3 university studies showed the development of cataracts and other damage to the eye following exposure to millimeter waves. 3, effects on our heart. 2 studies showed the occurrence of arrhythmias and changes in heart rate, pointing to stress from the heart from exposure, stress on the heart from the exposure of millimeter waves. Effects on the immune system. After exposure to millimeter waves, profound effects on the cells of the immune system were seen, suggesting decreased immune system ability to fight infections. Effects on bacteria resistance. The same study showed that millimeter waves altered bacteria's sensitivity to antibiotics and leading to more antibiotic resistance. The 5 millimeter waves are a threat to plant health as they will damage their cells, lower their nutrient levels, and threaten our food supply. 5 millimeter waves also negatively affect the bees. They alter the bees' sense of navigation, and therefore they cannot find their way home, which affects their ability to pollinate fruits and vegetables. The long-term consequences of this can affect our food supply. And very importantly, most 5G studies are misleading. Research shows...
Thank you. Thank you. We'll read the rest of your testimony.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Lisa.
I can read the rest of my
No,
sentence?
no, we'll read the rest of your
Okay.
testimony. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Lisa Klein. No. Stefan Rossetti. Vivek Kulkarni. All right. Sarah Timlin. All right. Very good.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Lizzie Timlin. I live in Kensington, and I moved to Montgomery County when I was 2. First, I wanted to thank you guys. I came here thinking I was like Mr. Smith going to Rockville, and I didn't realize what a complicated issue this was. And rock and a hard place, this is a super hard thing.
You got it.
My youngest brother died of glioblastoma multiforme in 2016. Right above he's right-handed, right above the ear where he survived about 14 months, which is the average. It was a horrible, horrible way to die. He left a widow and 2 teenage children going to BCC. So it's a very real issue. I understand it's not like you get it as soon as you use a phone. It increases your likelihood, and I'm firmly convinced that might have played a part in his death. But you were asking, just listening to all this, I don't feel as though it's quite ready to roll out what you have there. Some of the issues that concern me are the public transparency and comment. I don't really know that I'm completely familiar with the way the zoning text amendment is structured right now, but it sounds that that's a concern. Also, DPS enforcement sounds like, that should be happening prior to, like you said, putting more regulations out there that they're supposedly going to enforce. It also seems to me as you have a lot of experts here, both on the industry side and in the citizenry side, that could allow you to determine what kind of coverage we actually do need, because business will always push for more and more and more. The more you sell, the more money you make. And I understand that. But also we have young people here that are saying it's their livelihoods. I own a cell phone, but I take a lot of precautions now that I understand what the effects are. Also, I compliment you for working with other communities that are facing this issue. Finally, I would suggest, whether we go with 5G or not, even with 4G, education and outreach efforts with our youth especially, but with everyone across the board, to understand what the health effects of this technology are and how they're going to begin to impact in a serious way affecting the health of people who live in the county. Really instructing people things that you can do, either Bluetooth or wired headsets, turning off the Wi-Fi in your house at night. We use a timer. There's a whole lot of things that you can do, and a lot of expertise in this room of people. I bet everyone here owns a cell phone, and thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Thank you for that testimony. Much appreciated. Victoria.
Yes, good evening to the board. And just listening to what I've heard tonight and some of the studies that I've done, I wonder, because it says basically that we have one of the highest limits, set one of the highest limits for EMFs in the world, yet we're behind in technology. Something's not rhyming. But what I'd like to say for the record, obviously, is that I am opposed to ZTA. There's substantial evidence that supports the fact that living organisms such as humans, plants, animals, insects have been and continue to be impacted by the harmful effects of EMFs. It is important that we understand this, since the frequency levels referred to in a 2012 report are substantially lower than the levels that would be bombarding our communities once this program is deployed. The 2012 Bio-Initiative report, which I've given a copy to each one of the council members, it's a summary, is titled A Rationale for Biologically Based Exposure Standards for Low-Intensity Electromagnetic Radiation. So those who sit around and say there's no real evidence, this right here is the golden nugget. It is a comprehensive report prepared by 29 authors from 10 countries, a working group consisting of scientists, researchers, and public health and public policy experts. The strength of this well-respected report is that it has been done independent of governments, existing bodies, and industry professional societies that have clung to old standards. Therefore, this report, quote, presents a solid scientific and public health policy assessment that is evidence-based, end quote. 1,800 new studies were documented between the initial report in 2007 and the subsequent 2012 edition. Within these studies, effects were reported of exposure levels 10 to hundreds or thousands of times lower than allowed under safety limits in most countries of the world. I would like to briefly address several of the evidence issues listed under the summary of the science section. Concerns have been identified with regards to the allowable EMF levels discussed in the report. The summary, part of a more than 1,500-page document, provides this crucial beneficial information in a condensed format. The level of frequency emitted by 5G will be approximately 6 to 100 gigahertz or higher. Therefore, the evidence shown should be a grave reminder that we'll see increased incidences of these previously noted findings. So this is the evidence of some of the effects from which comes from the summary. Evidence to damage of sperm and reproduction for fetal and neonatal effects, on effects of autism, electrohypersensitivity, which is often misdiagnosed as a mental disorder, effects from cell tower levels, RFR exposure, for effects on the blood-brain barrier, and many of the others you've heard tonight. So it's very important that we...
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I think we've been joined by Lisa Klein.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Klein. Thanks for hearing everybody out tonight. I'm sure I'm going to repeat. I'm not going to repeat what a lot of people have said about kids and health and cell towers. Kids are my thing. They're everybody's thing. But I am here. I'm a Gaithersburg resident, so we have our own zoning text. But I'm here as a representative of the MCC-PTA, which I work very closely with on safe technology issues. And I'll tell you what's not squaring up with me and adding up is that I look back at all the work that you folks have done. In 2014, you came out, Mr. Berliner especially, and said black rubber crumb on the playground and on our artificial turf fields is not okay. It's being studied by health experts. It's not something we really want to touch, and there are viable alternatives. And you created a resolution, and it was to address and alleviate community concerns. So that's kind of the theme I looked at when I looked back at some of the work that you've done. The e-cigarette situation, and that was, I think, Mrs. Florine, you had come out very strongly to say the county should not wait for the federal government to act on this. So you did, which was terrific, and we thank you for that. Very recently, Council Member Leventhal, you supported condoms in the high schools to prevent the spread of disease. Well, cancer is the disease. Many of us have been touched by it. I personally have been very touched by it. My daughter passed away of it. I don't want to touch this stuff. I don't want cell towers near schools. I've asked repeatedly for setbacks from schools, 1,500 feet. I have given you guys lists of other communities that have done it. I know you know it's the right thing to do. I know there are ways to do it. I know what you're thinking, and I'm sure Mr. Reamer, we've talked about this a lot, that you cannot deny applications based on health. Well, what you can do is deny them based on RF emissions not being up to standards. So baking something into the ZTA that says that the towers need to comply and they need to be tested monthly, or if there's a concerned community or neighbor that says that tower doesn't sound right, it's buzzing more than it used to, I want it checked out. There should be something in here that has the owner of the pole come out and check it out so that the family knows that it's within limits. You know, I have an RF meter. I've been around. The limits are pretty high for the bioinitiative standard, not for the FCC. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, for your thoughtful testimony. And that concludes this group of speakers. And I believe our last group for the evening, Robert Janku, Vicky Huo, Ian Dingwall, Cliff Sosin, Wei Shen, Mark Preslin, and James Sledge. Thanks. All right. No one will criticize you if you say "me too" in one direction or the other, but we are here to hear you however you may choose to speak in your 3 minutes. Robert Janku, you're first, so it's a different button probably if the light isn't coming on. There you go.
My name is Robert Janku. I live in Wesley. The art of politics should be about reaching consensus. Let's do it. In May of 2018, CNBC's David Faber asked Lowell McAdam, current chairman of Verizon and former CEO, about 5G cellular towers 25 feet from house. McAdam replied, "No one thought that was good." McAdam went on to say, "We are now designing the network for 2,000 feet from transmitter to receiver." The City of Gaithersburg's solution is to ban cell towers in the right-of-way on residential streets with underground utilities, allow stealth antennas on all buildings, and encourage 5G antennas on poles along arterial roads. City personnel will proactively negotiate with tower companies to place antennas on city-owned poles on arterial roads. Why isn't the rest of Montgomery County as good as Gaithersburg? With a Google map, I found homes in Wesley are within 2,000 feet of existing utility poles on arterial roads. For Duffife and Falls Grove, there may be a need for one modern 5G cellular tower. Thus, the proposed 16 towers in these 3 neighborhoods are reduced to 1. The county should revise the purpose of the tower committee to focus on proactively reaching out to the tower companies to pick sites with the least impact on the community. The idea that this ZTA will save me money is a farce. I might save a few dollars a month on my internet bill, but I will lose tens of thousands of dollars when I sell my house. We need a study on the impact of residential cell towers on tax revenue. My quick and dirty calculation shows the county losing somewhere between $500,000 to $1.5 million in revenue per year on the installation of 61 towers. That's a lot of money to ignore. The county needs to pause and reflect on this new reality. We either need to scrap this ZTA or rewrite it to reflect the 2,000-foot range of 5G signals. Consensus can be reached by basing ZTA on the modern 5G technology that McAdam cites. I would also like to add that the 911 call is very easily resolved. When the cell tower receives 911 call, no capacity, just boot somebody off. 911 should have priority. Thank you.
All right. Vicky Huo.
My name is Vicky Huo. I have lived at 7800 Brickyard Road, Potomac, Maryland for 31 years. The council is considering a zoning rules to make it even faster and easier to install very tall cell poles even closer to people's homes. But before you do so, I believe the council should fully fix the process for reviewing and approving cell poles, the process that mostly unchanged for 7 years. I want to tell you a story how a cell pole without tower committee recommendation, without a permit, yet installed in my front yard. The process utterly failed my neighbors and my family 7 years ago when the county allowed Pepco to remove and replace a 35-foot pole with a 68-foot pole that is about 40 feet away from our bedrooms. Pepco and Crown Castle stated the cell pole had been approved at a public meeting and as a result received a permit to construct this facility, referred to as Note 9. But none of that was correct. In fact, what the Tower Committee actually recommended in a public meeting on May 5th, 2010, was to install at 7701 Brickyard Road, a wireless facility on a specific pole. That specific pole is across the street and 150 feet away from my house at 7800 Brickyard. This pole is situated more than 100 feet away from any houses in that neighborhood. The DPS permit clearly shows an address of 7701 Brickyard Road, but on their work order attached to the permit, someone decided to move Note 9 to 7800 Brickyard Road, my home. How does this possibly comply with applicable standards and procedures? So my neighbors and I petitioned the county council for help, and we were stunned to receive this response. Quote, even every council member agree with your recommendation to relocate the pole. We lack the authority to enforce that recommendation. So what happened is that it exposed, one, the Tower Committee has no responsibility for the final decision on the placement of cell poles. Second, DPS has no accountability for the accuracy of permit.
Thank you.
Nor compliances with Tower Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Huo.
3.
Excuse me, everyone has the same time. We
And
are
most
all
importantly,
equal.
when mistakes are made,
All right.
the council has no desire nor
All right.
to fix
Come on.
or enforce anything.
Thank you. All right. Ian Dingwall.
Good evening. I'm still Ian Dingwall. I'm here representing the Wesley Homeowners Association. We are 337 homes in North Potomac, Maryland. Frankly, I'm here to speak on behalf of myself as well. I moved here 40 years ago into a farmer's field at the time. Since that time, we've designed a park next to my home called DeFeef Park. We've put in natural gas to our home, cable. All this happened in cooperation with the county. Frankly, I don't feel the same kind of give and take with the county over the construction of small cell towers. To my surprise, outside my door is the proposed location of a cell tower. I know this because they've already installed a box marking where it will go. This happened without my knowledge. It just happened. I was outraged to find this. And then I happened to ask one of my neighbors, so what are they doing? What are they installing? What does it look like? And I heard that they're putting in a 5G small tower. First time I ever heard of a 5G small tower. And he said to me, I don't know what it's going to look like, but, you know, frankly, my concern is safety. I don't know what you propose to put in my front yard. I don't know how safe it is. I don't know if it's as safe as a microwave oven in my kitchen, or as troubling as perhaps the x-ray that my dentist takes of my teeth once a year. And I don't think you do either. And that's what concerns me. Doing a little research, I found out that the chairman and former CEO of Verizon says these things don't need to be located within 30 feet of your house. They can actually be put out on the old 4G towers that are out on our perimeter roads. And so that seems like a simple fix. Don't put 16 cell phone towers in my neighborhood. We don't believe small towers belong in residential areas. And so there's an easy solution. Put it out. Put it out on the highways. And I would submit to you that if you don't know what the safety associated with these towers are, you should have the companies put a sticker on the tower. Warning, don't stand here for more than 10 minutes. Something that tells us what it is that this tower is emitting. And then we'll know, and we'll decide to move away if that's what we want to do. But to just simply say that the government won't let me.
Thank you.
Is a mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Dingwall. Cliff Sosin. All right. Lee Shen. All right. Mark Preslin. Nope. James Sledge. You get the last word tonight.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jim Sledge. I'm from Germantown. Glad to be number 44. And I do appreciate that this has been going on for a while, but I still think there are a lot of things that we have said over and over and over and aren't reflected in this ZTA. You say that you can't legislate based on health effects, yet here we are. You're changing the distance you can place it from your house from 60 feet to 30 feet. Isn't that legislating on that? So you're making a statement. At the same time, you're taking an action which is contrary to that statement. There's been a lot of evidence, which you are well aware of, and everyone in this room is well aware of, documenting the health effects. Making that change is irresponsible, and every one of you know it. I think there needs to be something that forces the providers to consider further distances from the house and prove to you that it's necessary to place them that close. There's nothing in here that protects us. We ask you, members of my community ask you about property values. There's nothing in this that protects us from property values going down because of these being placed closer to our homes. If you don't believe it to be a reasonable consideration, or you don't believe it to be the case, then certainly you should not be afraid to put something in here that would require the carriers to put funds aside to accommodate and take care of homeowners when it does occur. Post-installation reviews. There's nothing in here that requires that. There's nothing in here that shows coordination with those responsible for taking care of it. If it takes 7 years and something hasn't been taken care of, there's a problem. Fix it. You know how to fix it, And don't say it's not within your capability to do it. If you can't communicate with the rest of the people in our own county government, we've got a bigger problem here. Notification to homeowners. There's nothing in here that says when you're going to propose a tower close to a home that homeowners in that area have to be notified. That needs to be included. The last thing is, what happens to those towers that have already been approved by the Tower Committee which do not meet these zoning standards?
All right, folks. Thanks for participating. The committee, well, we actually haven't decided how we're going to move forward, but tonight's public hearing is over. Thank you very much.